Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Over the last 25 years, Wicomico County has lost 1 out of every 3 manufacturing jobs. So is there anything that can bring them back or replace them? Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. During that period, manufacturing lost 1,800 jobs. Also, the total share of jobs in manufacturing in Wicomico County dropped from 16% down to about 8%. Most recent blow, of course, came with Alabama Power Systems, which makes wiring for commercial and military aerospace industries. Its plant will close in Salisbury, and 650 jobs will disappear with it as the company moves its operations to Texas. Our in-studio guest is Memo Derricker, founder of Business, Economic, and Community Outreach Network here on the Salisbury University campus. Welcome to the program.
My pleasure to be here.
So, as a matter of fact, I ran across a quote of yours it says, "We are becoming more and more an economy of technology and skilled work." How does that apply to what we're looking at in terms of what we've lost in Wicomico County and what, if anything, we might gain in Wicomico County?
Sure. Well, what's happening in Wicomico County is somewhat a reflection of what's happening globally and also nationally. The whole economic profile of the world and economic profile of the United States is changing, and with it, economic profile of the state of Maryland and on the Eastern Shore, Wicomico County is changing. Wicomico County in the past 30 years or so has been on a quest to become more diversified in its economic profile. And it has actually been very successful in doing this. And the goal was to not be committed to only one industry that would make or break you. So now we have no part of our economic profile that dominates any other part. It's a very balanced economy. Manufacturing globally is changing. Low-skilled work is going to low-pay countries, and high-skilled work is concentrating on the more industrialized, more developed countries, and that's exactly what's happening in the United States. So as manufacturing's percentage of the jobs in the country declines, so does it decline here. At the country level, we have seen a 33% decline, I think, over 20 years, and now, 30% decline. And here in Wicomico County, it's 33%. Those are very similar numbers, only 3 percentage points difference between the two of them. While we are losing those low-pay, low-skill jobs, we are gaining the higher-pay, higher-skill jobs. But they don't make the headlines because they don't come in 200 or 600 numbers. They come in 10 here, 12 there. But if you look at the overall trend in Wicomico County, even through recessions, we have been adding, the jobs that we have been adding are what we call come here jobs with high technical skills, high training, and high capabilities. Those are the higher margin. An individual with a 6-figure income supports 3 to 4 other jobs. So the profile is changing, and what used to be is getting committed to the history books.
Well, speaking of the history books, what kinds of industries have we basically lost that are not coming back?
Well, most of the manufacturing we lost had come here because of a good economic reason. Maybe it was close to the raw materials, the soup factory being close to the seafood, the crown crocus seal being close to the food processing plants to be able to provide the packaging materials. All of those good reasons are no longer there. We now import a lot of the seafood, and the canning is done sometimes even on the ships when it's being brought in. So the nature of the supply chain is changing. Companies still relocate for a few very simple basic reasons. They want to be close to the raw material, or they want to be close to the market itself, or they want to be close to the skilled workforce. When any one of those factors changes in a locality, they go to where they're going to find it. They're finding lower pay workforce for low-skilled jobs in China. In the future, it's going to be in Africa. So as those changes happen, we're simply adapting to the next generation of jobs here. But it's going to take time to really adapt, because these things are like big tankers. They take a while to turn. And our workforce development program, our education programs throughout the United States, and it's very especially here on the Eastern Shore in Wicomico County, is going to have to adapt to these new skill sets. It's okay to import the engineers or the scientists, but we're going to have to grow the technicians and the lab people on our own.
Well, speaking of that, in terms of developing a workforce, I mean, I remember doing a story a number of years back looking at, for instance, I think it was either the average or the median income in, say, for instance, neighboring Somerset County, and it was only like about $21,000 a year, which seems to me to indicate that we're talking about a very low-skilled labor force. I suspect it's probably a bit higher, perhaps, here in Wicomico County, but not necessarily a large jump. How do you take that workforce, which has been doing this low labor in terms of low skills, and moving them into these high-skilled jobs in any kind of numbers? Because I think that's really where we're at. I mean, it's great to have small programs and learning and that sort of thing, going to Warwick and that sort of, and they're all doing great stuff. But how do you get the numbers so that you can transform that workforce that has been basically low-skill labor?
What I'm going to say next is going to sound cold. It's going to sound callous. But it is the reality that we live in. Developing comprehensive workforce development programs and getting them online is a very difficult, very complex, and very expensive proposition. And it's going to take time. And unfortunately, as we're making this new system come alive, we're going to have to make some very, very tough decisions. And those decisions are to do with who do we train to become the next generation workforce. And if you look at the jobs we are losing, you see that the median age of those jobs are in the 50s. I don't know what can be done to retool these individuals for the next generation jobs, especially given that this process is going to take anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 years. But we can create the next generation, starting with our middle school kids, but with our high school kids now, so that by the time they enter the workforce, they have the right set of skills for the right kinds of jobs rather than yesterday's jobs. So these are the difficult decisions. And the question that I am not capable of answering at this stage is, what do we do with the 50-year-olds who are losing their jobs as these companies leave, as the profile of the economy changes?
Do any of these programs that we have, whether it's at the universities or elsewhere, in terms of training, can they train any kind of large enough numbers of these folks that you're talking about, the 50 and over, or the 40 and over for that matter?
On their own, no. Without external assistance, no. That's why the decision is difficult, because somebody at the public level, public policy level, at the state or federal level is going to have to make the decision that that particular investment to make that happen is going to be worth the return on that investment. And that's a calculation that is very difficult to make. And that even when it is made, the results may not be to the liking of those public policy decision makers from elsewhere. In the final analysis, they're looking at numbers, not people. We are looking at people, not numbers.
So what does that mean for you think the average native here on Delmarva? I mean, because obviously you do have an influx of people
Correct.
coming in, and I know that's already created a certain amount of tension. The come here's versus the people who are born here.
Absolutely.
What does that do, that social and economic dynamic?
One thing that I learned upon my arrival here 26 years ago, which means I'm a new arrival, that the people here are very, very resilient, and they're very adaptive. They're very innovative. They find ways to deal with adversity, and they know how to deal with difficulty. And they're also very independent, and those are exactly the right set of skills they need to have to be able to deal with this. Because what I'm gently trying to say is that those public policy decision makers are not going to make those investments for the 50-plus population. It's going to have to be done by them individually and by us locally as collectively through non-government organizations rather than public policy decision makers. So these individuals, relying on their Delmarva skill sets of independent, hardy individuals, are going to have to take a good look at themselves. They're going to have to take stock of their skills and do something to lift themselves up. And I have seen so many examples of this. I've seen people lose their jobs and start landscaping companies. I've seen people lose their jobs and go to their hobby and start making money with their woodworking skills. And that's exactly the kind of self-employed, self-paced, self-educated, self-trained kind of individuals that our economy needs. Because look at what we need. We need people to help take care of our aging population. That requires a little bit of training, but it's a relatively easy training to get if you want to become an elder caregiver. We require people to fix homes. Becoming a handyman takes a little bit of experience, a little bit of training, but again, it doesn't require thousands of dollars in certification courses, etc., unless you're going to try to become an electrician or something. So it is going to become very individually driven and very smart, agile, innovative, and entrepreneurial.
It sounds as if you're describing what some people have described as a new economy.
It is. It really is. In fact, when you look at the jobs created on the shore, majority of the jobs are created because of these small enterprises. We hear the news on the television, on the radio. We read the headlines about the 100 ones, 200 ones, 600 ones. But the reality is they are being replaced by tens of 10-person plus organizations. And that's the future for a rural area with connections to good markets. A couple other things that are interesting that are happening. NASA Wallops is changing. The new business incubator there is going to create all kinds of new opportunities. But those are the kind of opportunities that are going to be beyond the low skill. They're going to be slightly higher skills. We believe sooner rather than later, wind power is going to be a part throughout the Atlantic seaboard. You might have certain skills, but you have to marry those skills with other skills. You might know how to do welding, but you now have to learn how to do welding at very high construction, in the middle of the sea, and not get seasick. Right. So these are the combination skills that people are going to have to put together. I got a call from somebody who heard about our work with wind power, and he said, "Look, I'm a safety inspector. I would like to learn more about the safety regulations on construction of these windmills. Where can I learn more and become a safety inspector?" That was exactly the kind of supply chain and workforce issues that the people working on this new industry have been looking for. So it was wonderful for this individual on their own to say, I can do this. What's the next step? Governments are too busy trying to take care of basic core responsibilities to be able to worry about changes in economic profiles in a rural area. We are on our own, but we have the capability to do something with it.
I was going to say, because one of the issues that came up as I was reading some of the literature was the fact that we are a rural area, and that seems to produce at least some drawbacks, including low property values, at least at this point. Here in Wicomico County, of course, we have the revenue cap, which has created its own pressures when it comes to local government and spending. Just talk a little bit about the problems that a rural area faces, and how do you overcome some of those problems?
You mentioned some of the problems we have. We have infrastructure problems. We have bottlenecks. When you look at Wicomico County, we always talked about us being the crossroads of Delmarva. Yes, we are, but we are at the cross of the only two arteries. There's no resiliency in the system. There's no backups. We're at the mercy of the bridge and tunnel in the south. We're at the mercy of the Bay Bridge. Up north, we're at the mercy of a few bridges. These are infrastructure issues that we're going to have to deal with. Our power line currently comes from the north, and it's like an appendix. There's no alternative to it. If something happens to that power line, there's not a second power line that can bring that power to us. In many of our industrial parks, we have capacity issues. Land is cheap. That can be a good thing, but going together with that, a manufacturer or any company is going to look at the transportation issues, and they're going to say, look, in addition to having these bottleneck issues in the summer on a Thursday or a Friday or a Sunday, trying to do Route 50 or even Route 113 is going to be difficult. All these things come to play to provide negatives. On the other hand, businesses come here for a fourth reason that we didn't talk about before. In fact, that has become the number one reason businesses locate here. The owners, the entrepreneurs, the wealth creators, the creative class like living and playing and working here. So they are bringing their lifestyle. They're coming for the lifestyle, or they are staying for the lifestyle. And to be able to afford their lifestyle, they're creating the businesses, the wealth around them. That is a major attraction. This is a wonderful part of the Eastern Seaboard. People want to live here. there are parts of the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean that are very, very attractive to these individuals. People who are outdoorsy, who want to do hunting, fishing, they come here. They then create these businesses either to be able to stay here or to move here. We have a lot of retirees who retire early, come to their summer places, and after about a year of playing golf and fishing, they get bored and they start businesses or they join businesses. This is the way we're going to build that future. Suddenly, our rural nature, our close to the beach, close to the bay nature is going to be our biggest asset. So we're going to have to invest in the path of least resistance rather than the difficult path of recreating yesterday without having yesterday's conditions.
What kind of role do you think that the major assets, like, for instance, the hospital that we have here, PRMC, or Salisbury University, what role do they play, and can we become overly dependent upon large entities like that to produce a kind of economic activity that we want?
Well, I wouldn't call it overly dependent. I will call it a very solid patchwork of assets, the absence of which would be a problem. So when you look at the calculus that people go through for choosing a place to live, they look at safety, they look at health, they look at education, they look at these things, and failing to invest in these things, failing to keep them up to par, state of the art, would be a problem. Our hospital is a major attraction to the creative class. They want a good healthcare system. The in-migration of seniors to the shore has created a very robust healthcare system to serve their needs. But in the process, we now have more healthcare capabilities on the shore than we did 25 years ago. All of these procedures and treatments that we had to go to the Baltimore or Washington facilities for, we can now have done here. And together with new technology, telemedicine, etc., all our local facilities are partnering with their counterparts, well-known counterparts throughout the United States. So if I were the king of Delmarva, I would invest in those educational facilities. I would invest in those healthcare facilities. I would invest in those recreational facilities to create that quality of life, because economic well-being follows quality of life, and quality of life follows economic well-being. They're kind of a cycle, if you will. And if you don't have good quality of life, you're not going to be able to build a good economy.
Ran across a quote by Newt Fowler. He's Baltimore Attorney Chairman of the Innovation Alliance, which is this nonprofit that assists tech startups. And the quote is, he says, talking about our region, the biggest challenge the region faces is itself. You have to get out of your own way. Do you think that's true? Do you think that we're doing things or have done things that have gotten in the way of this kind of economic development change that we're looking at?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, if you recall, we invited Newt to come here as our speaker for the economic forecast, the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce's economic forecast last December. And Newt and the chamber leadership, we had extensive conversations about this issue. And it is extremely, extremely accurate analysis. Newt is validating something we have been saying: we have to live in tomorrow, not yesterday. And by trying to live in yesterday, we are getting in our own way. Trying to become penny-wise, pound foolish sometimes, we're getting in our own way. Good thing is there are many, many leaders, elected, appointed, and volunteer in the community who have been getting together, discussing about getting even better prepared for the tomorrows of Delmarva, that we are beginning to overcome that let's keep it the way it used to be 25 years ago mindset, and replacing it, where are we going 25 years from now? We have hurdles, we have obstacles, but we are cognizant of those. And the key movers and shakers are doing wonderful things. And here's something that's going to come strange from a 50-plus person like myself. When I look at the 30-somethings now running around and making things happen in this community, in my 26-plus years here, I have never seen anybody younger than 60 taking those kinds of leadership positions. Now we have a whole bunch of 30-plus individuals, both at the public and private sector, in these leadership positions. And I feel good about the future, because they have every reason to want to do the right things, because they're going to be here another 60 years. It is in their very best personal interest to make things happen. And by golly, they're making things happen. And thank goodness for them.
What kinds of things do you think that we've done in the past kind of specific maybe policies that have kept us from moving forward? I mean, I mentioned, for instance, obviously the revenue cap. That's a controversial one.
Yeah.
Some people say yes, no. What are some of the kinds of specific things that we've been done in the past that perhaps we need or are getting rid of?
Well, you brought the revenue cap out, so let me talk about that a little bit. There's nothing wrong with creating policies that provide accountability and responsibility to the fiscal policies of any kind of jurisdiction. So rate caps and even revenue caps, when done right, are very valid public policy tools. Unfortunately, it looks like we didn't do ours right. And there are a number of weaknesses in our revenue cap. For example, its selection of the inflation CPIU is not a very sensible one. Its selection of a single look at CPIU in December is not a very good one. Other places who have done this better have used cost of government indices. The other thing is our revenue cap has no safety valve to it. In an emergency, it doesn't allow the decision makers to maybe put it on hold or amend it. Finally, it has a very negative ratcheting effect. If you don't take full use of your allowed 2%, or the CPIU max, whichever is higher, you never are able to get that back. Nature of the beast is cost of government, whether it's small or large, keeps increasing. And it will continue to increase. And by and large, it will increase sometimes higher than CPIU or that 2%. And you can never get that back. So you're constantly trying to curtail services as costs of those services keep going up. For example, 25 years ago, we didn't have to deal with wireless telecom issues. So inflation might not have changed, but now we're looking at $600 a year per unit of additional costs that we didn't have before. So these are the same thing with broadband. We didn't have broadband costs. Now we have to put in the infrastructure and maintain that infrastructure. This has nothing to do with inflation. This has to do with the nature of technology and business and what we do. So these are the issues that we're going to have to deal with. And where is it hitting us worse? In our education. I am not a fan of increasing education spending simply by looking at what we paid last year and looking at per pupil. But we should create an equation that says for each dollar of investment, this is the kind of education outcome we expect. And if we were to increase that dollar by this many cents, this is how much more of positive educational outcome we must get. Once you put that equation in place, the way some people have done, for example, in Utah, you might spend the same amount or less, but get even more. But when the need is there to spend more, for example, bring new technology in, you're not at the mercy of an artificial percentage number. So these are the kinds of difficult but smart decisions that need to be made in our community. Same thing with our infrastructure. We have to build some kind of resiliency to our transportation system. We have to make sure that the roads are available for freight when possible. We might want to say, okay, freight, you will pay a lot less if you come in these hours when the tourists are not around. Whatever the solution is, we have to invest in the rail because that's one of the things we can do to reduce pressure on our roadways. Difficult decisions, expensive decisions, but in the long run, they pay a very, very healthy return on investment. In the absence of this, we're constantly going to be nickel and diming ourselves and bleeding from every place possible because things get old, things get breakdown. You have to replace road surfaces. We do have weather-related incidents here a lot. So these are the kinds of things we have to be very clever about. Unfortunately, the political winds right now is that any spending is bad spending, and that should not be the way people think. That should not be the way public policy decision makers think. My roof is leaking, and it's going to require $1,000 to fix. Oh goodness, no! I'm not going to pay $1,000. I'm just going to let it leak and become a bigger and bigger problem. I'll wait till the roof collapses. That's not the way to do public policy.
Are you optimistic? Just briefly, are you optimistic that
I am actually very, very optimistic.
change?
First of all, I wanted to say something about manufacturing that I forgot to say.
Go ahead.
You know, we complain about manufacturing, but listen to this. Except for a brief slowdown during the 2001 recession, U.S. manufacturing is producing more goods than ever before. Every year we have produced more than the year before. Even as we talk about less, And yes, now China is the number one manufacturing producer, but we were number one. Now we're number two. And even as number two, we're still producing more every year than the year before. Now, what's happening is we're producing more higher skill goods, which don't require as many people working on them. We're using more productivity and we're using more automation. But the goods we produce have higher margins. So the only jobs we are losing are the very low-paying, low-skilled jobs. And in some ways, that's a good thing because you cannot base your future on low-pay, low-skilled jobs. You need to base your future on higher-skill, higher-margin goods. The other thing I want to say is that in 2001 or so, we gave China permanent favored nation status in our trade relationships.
Right.
So that allowed them to take over some of these low-skill, low-pay type manufacturing jobs. But as a result of that, we have adapted and we have taken this specialty path of becoming the country for building these higher skill, higher tech, higher margin with higher paying jobs kinds of things. So it's not a bad place we're in. If Wicomico takes that same trend, and it has to a certain extent, but continues that and bring in more higher paying, higher skilled jobs in manufacturing or other industries, then the rest will follow.
We've been speaking with Memo Dereker. He's founder of the Business, Economic, and Community Outreach Network here on the campus of Salisbury University, and we appreciate you stopping by and talking to us.
My pleasure, as always.
And this has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, view the daily times, or visit pac14.org.